Rebecca Walsh had been a diplomat for exactly 3 months when she destroyed any chance of galactic peace. She sat in the observation room of Orbital Station 7, watching the debris field where a Korean memorial ship used to be. The station's artificial gravity felt too heavy, or maybe that was just the weight of what humanity had done. The memorial ship had carried artifacts from the Korean homeworld. Not just any artifacts. These were the founding stones, the actual rocks that the first Korean city had been built upon 4,000 years ago. Now those stones were dust, scattered across space like ash from a cremation nobody wanted. Rebecca pressed her hand against the cold window. Behind her, the conference room had erupted into chaos 30 minutes ago and still hadn't calmed down. She could hear Ambassador Greaves shouting at someone through the door. Probably at Earth Command, possibly at God. The malfunction had been random, a defense grid error, a cascade failure in the automated systems that protected the station. One pulse. That's all it took. One misfired weapons pulse and humanity became the species that destroyed another civilization's most sacred treasure. Through the window, Rebecca watched the Korean ships arriving. Dozens of them, dark and angular, moving with the kind of precision that spoke of military discipline. They weren't attacking, not yet. They were arranging themselves in a formation that Rebecca had studied during her training. A grief pattern. The Koreans were warriors and philosophers both, and they expressed mourning through geometric perfection in space. Dr. Walsh. A voice behind her. She turned to find Captain David Ross, the military liaison assigned to the diplomatic mission. His uniform looked rumpled, his eyes tired. The Korean High Arbiter is broadcasting. Rebecca followed him to the communications center. The room had gone silent. On the main screen, High Arbiter Quindara appeared. He was tall even by Korean standards. His gray skin marked with the honor scars of his rank. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his face, held no anger. That was worse. Anger could be negotiated with. This was something colder. Humanity has taken what cannot be returned, Quindara said. His voice came through the translators with perfect clarity. The stones of our beginning are gone. In their place you offer what? Technical explanations? System failures? He paused. We have heard Earth's initial response. Your leaders speak of accidents and regrets. These are wind. These are nothing. Rebecca felt her stomach drop. She had written that initial response herself, working with Greaves and the Earth Command legal team. Every word had been carefully chosen, reviewed, approved. Every word had apparently meant nothing. The Korean people declare blood debt, Quindara continued. We are joined by the Tuluvian Collective, the Vrin Assembly, the Shard Collective, and 9 other sovereign species. Together we form the Alliance of Grievance. The Galactic Council will hear our demands in 30 rotations. Humanity will answer. The screen went dark. 30 rotations, Greaves said from across the room. That's about 40 Earth days. 40 days to figure out how to stop a war. Rebecca turned away from the screen. Her mind was already working through possibilities, running through everything she knew about Korean culture, about galactic diplomacy, about conflict resolution between species. What do they want? She asked. What would satisfy a blood debt? Combat, Ross said quietly. Or tribute so massive it bankrupts the debtor. Or they wait until the shame drives the offender to extinction. He shook his head. I've studied Korean honor codes. There's no easy path through this. Greaves walked over to them. He was older than Rebecca, a career diplomat with 40 years of experience. His face looked gray. Earth Command wants recommendations. They want options. What do we tell them? Rebecca looked back at the debris field. Small Korean ships were moving through it now, collecting what they could, searching for pieces that might have survived. She thought about her own family history, about her grandfather who had commanded a peacekeeping unit that wasn't very peaceful, about wrongs that had never been addressed, wounds that had never healed because nobody had the courage to face them. We need to research, Rebecca said. Every conflict resolution in galactic history, every peace negotiation, every way that species have resolved blood debts and honor disputes. We've already done that, Greaves said. It's all in the database. Combat, tribute, or time. Those are the only options that have ever worked. Then we need to find a 4th option. Ross looked at her with something like curiosity. You think there is one? Rebecca didn't answer right away. She watched the Korean recovery ships, tiny lights moving through darkness, trying to save what could be saved. I think we better hope there is, she said finally. Because if we choose combat, we lose. If we choose tribute, we bankrupt our homeworld. And if we choose time, we leave this wound open for generations. The room fell silent. Outside the window, more ships were arriving. Not just Corian. Teluvian vessels, crystalline and strange. Vryn cruisers, organic and flowing. The alliance of grievance was gathering. Rebecca made a decision. I need access to the complete galactic archives. Everything, every first contact, every war, every peace treaty and recorded history. That's 15,000 years of data, Greaves said. Then I better start reading. She left the observation room and headed for the archive terminals. Behind her, she could hear Greaves and Ross talking in low voices. They thought she was looking for a diplomatic solution in the records. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. Rebecca wasn't looking for what had worked before. She was looking for what had never been tried. Because if humanity was going to survive this, they needed to do something that no species in the history of the galaxy had ever done. They needed to do something that would either save them or doom them completely. She just had to figure out what that something was. The archive terminals on Orbital Station 7 never slept, and neither did Rebecca Walsh. For 6 days she had been reading, her eyes burning from the screen light, her body running on coffee substitutes that tasted like regret. The galactic record spread before her like an ocean of information, 15,000 years of civilizations meeting, fighting, and somehow finding peace. Except peace wasn't the right word. Rebecca had discovered something troubling in those 6 days of research. The galaxy didn't do peace the way humans understood it. The galaxy did ceasefires, standoffs, elaborate face-saving ceremonies that let both sides walk away without admitting fault. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. On Earth, the United Assembly was in emergency session. The news feeds showed protests outside government buildings. Some people wanted war. Some wanted Earth to pay whatever price the Alliance demanded. Everyone was afraid. You look terrible, Ross said, setting down a tray of food beside her terminal. Real food this time, not ration bars. When did you last eat? I don't remember. Rebecca picked up something that looked like a sandwich. Did you know that in 15,000 years of recorded galactic history, there has never been a genuine apology? Ross pulled up a chair. What do you mean? There are peace treaties in there, reconciliations, no. There are settlements. There are agreements. There are compensation packages and non-admission clauses and carefully worded statements that acknowledge harm was done without saying who did it. Rebecca pulled up a file on her screen. Look at this. The Teluvian-Vryn War 800 years ago. Millions dead. The peace treaty has 47 pages about reparations and borders. Not one sentence where either side says they were wrong. Maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe it was complicated. It's always complicated. That's not the point. Rebecca opened another file. Or this one. The Shard Collective's colonial period. They occupied 14 planets, exploited the populations, extracted resources. When they withdrew, they signed documents about transitional governance and economic development. They never said the word sorry. Not once. Ross was quiet for a moment. You're looking for an apology. I'm looking for anything like an apology. Any species that looked at another species and said, "We were wrong, we hurt you, we take responsibility." Rebecca closed the files. It doesn't exist. Not in any form I can find. Maybe species don't apologize at the galactic level. Maybe. Rebecca turned to face him. Or maybe they can't. Maybe something about the way galactic civilization evolved, all these different species interacting, created cultures where admitting fault feels like suicide. Where saying you're wrong means you're weak. Ross picked at the food on the tray. His hands were steady, but Rebecca had learned to read the tension in his shoulders. I killed 43 people, he said quietly. 8 years ago. System malfunction on my ship. Emergency venting of an entire section. 43 crew members just gone. Rebecca waited. I filed the reports. I sat through the inquiry. I explained the technical failures, the cascade of errors that made it impossible to prevent. Everyone agreed it wasn't my fault. The system failed, not me. He looked up at her. I never apologized. Not really. Not in a way that meant anything. Because if I admitted I was responsible, even for something I couldn't control, my career would be over. My reputation would be destroyed. Would it, though? I've always thought so. Ross stood up. What you're suggesting, this apology you want to find in the records, it's not there because it's dangerous. Because when you admit you're wrong without conditions, without protection, you're completely vulnerable. Rebecca stood too. What if that's exactly what we need to be? Back on Earth, the debate raged. Rebecca watched the assembly session on her terminal, live feed from Geneva. Ambassador Greaves was there in person, presenting options to the leadership. His voice came through clear and professional. The military analysis is clear, Greaves said to the assembled representatives. If the alliance of grievance attacks, we cannot win a conventional war. Our fleet is too small, too scattered. We would need to withdraw to Earth's solar system and hope the defensive platforms hold. What about tribute? Someone asked from the floor. What would satisfy the blood debt? The Korean demand would likely include territory, resources, and technological access. Rough estimates suggest it would set Earth's economy back 50 years, possibly more. The chamber erupted in arguments. Rebecca muted the feed. She had heard enough. Earth's leadership was going to choose the path of least immediate destruction, which meant either fighting a war they couldn't win or paying a price that would cripple humanity's place in the galaxy unless she could show them a different way. Rebecca opened a new document and began to write. Not a policy proposal, not a diplomatic strategy. Just words. Simple words about what humanity had done and what it meant. She wrote about the memorial ship and the founding stones. She wrote about the Korean people and their loss. She wrote about responsibility and regret. The words came easier than she expected, maybe because she wasn't trying to protect anyone, not humanity's reputation, not Earth's political position. She was just trying to tell the truth about harm that had been done. Dr. Walsh. A message alert appeared on her screen. Priority communication from Earth Command. She opened it. The message was brief and cold. Dr. Walsh, your presence is required at emergency assembly session. Transport departing in 4 hours, non-negotiable. Rebecca smiled without humor. They wanted her to present her research, to offer some brilliant diplomatic solution pulled from the ancient records. She looked at the document she had been writing. It wasn't brilliant. It wasn't even clever. It was just honest. She thought about her grandfather again. He had died when Rebecca was 16, and she had spoken at his funeral. She had talked about his service and his dedication. She had not talked about the investigation into his unit's actions, about the civilians who had died, about the complaints that had been buried under classified stamps. The family had agreed not to mention it. Better to remember the good things, but the good things had felt hollow in her mouth. And for years afterward, Rebecca had felt the weight of words not spoken, truths not faced. She made a decision then. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperation of knowing that every conventional option led to disaster. Or maybe it was simply that Rebecca Walsh had spent too many years studying how civilizations fail, and she recognized the pattern humanity was following. She wasn't going to present research to the assembly. She wasn't going to recommend tribute or military preparation or diplomatic stalling. She was going to do something that no human diplomat had ever done at the galactic level, something that no species in 15,000 years of recorded history had done. She was going to apologize, really apologize, without conditions or protections or carefully worded non-admissions of fault. And she was going to do it whether Earth Command authorized it or not. Rebecca saved her document and began making preparations. Ross found her an hour later packing her personal belongings. "You're leaving?" he asked. "I'm going back to Earth," Rebecca said, "but I'm not going to do what they want me to do." Ross studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "You need help?" "I need someone who understands why this matters." "I understand," Ross said. "I've understood for 8 years. I just didn't know what to do about it. Now you do." They left the station together, heading for the transport that would take them back to Earth. Behind them, the Korean ships held their grief formation, waiting for humanity's answer. They would get one. Just not the answer anyone expected. Rebecca's apartment in Geneva overlooked the old city, buildings that had survived centuries of human conflict and cooperation. She stood at the window in the dark, her personal terminal glowing softly on the desk behind her. In 6 hours, she was supposed to present her findings to the United Assembly. In 6 hours, she was supposed to offer Earth a path through the crisis. She had a different plan. The terminal showed green. Ross had done his work well. The communication channels were ready. piggybacked onto the diplomatic network but routing through civilian satellites that Earth Command didn't monitor as closely. When Rebecca broadcast, her message would reach every inhabited system in the galaxy simultaneously. It would reach the Corian homeworld and the Teluvian collective nodes and the Vrin assembly halls. It would reach Earth Command about 30 seconds before they could stop it. "You're sure about this?" Ross's voice came through her comlink. He was in his quarters across the city running the technical side of what they were about to do. "No," Rebecca said honestly, "but I'm sure about what happens if we don't try." She had spent the last 3 days refining her words. Not diplomatic language, not careful phrases designed to avoid offense or admission, just truth spoken as clearly as she could manage. The document sat open on her terminal. 1,047 words. It felt too short to change the galaxy. It felt too long to hold so much weight. Rebecca thought about everything that had led to this moment. The memorial ship, the debris field, Quindara's cold eyes on the broadcast, but also deeper things. Her grandfather's funeral, the history classes about Earth's wars and genocides and slowly learned lessons, the understanding that humans had spent thousands of years learning how to say sorry, and maybe that was worth something. "Starting the sequence," Ross said. "Once you begin, we'll have maybe 3 minutes before command shuts us down." "That's enough time." Rebecca sat down at her terminal. She enabled the camera and adjusted the lighting. She wasn't wearing a uniform or formal diplomatic clothing. Just a simple shirt, dark blue. She wanted to look like a human being, not a representative of institutions and governments. Her finger hovered over the broadcast button. Everything she had been taught about diplomacy said this was wrong. You never apologized without getting something in return. You never admitted fault without protection. You never made yourself vulnerable without a guarantee of safety. But Rebecca had read 15,000 years of galactic history. She had seen what happened when species followed those rules. They survived, yes. They maintained their positions and their power. But they never healed. They never moved past their conflicts. They just buried them under treaties in time. She pressed the button. The camera activated. Across the galaxy, on 847 inhabited worlds, diplomatic channels suddenly carried a new transmission. An unauthorized broadcast from Earth. A single human woman looking directly into the camera. Rebecca took a breath and began to speak. "My name is Rebecca Walsh. I am a human. I am speaking without the authorization of my government, but I am speaking for humanity nonetheless. We owe the Corian people and the entire galaxy something that has not been given. An apology. A real one." Her voice was steady. She had practiced these words until they felt natural, until they stopped being a speech and became just the truth. 31 days ago, our defense system malfunctioned. A weapons pulse destroyed the Corian memorial ship. The founding stones of your civilization, objects of immeasurable sacred value, were reduced to debris. This happened because of our technology, our systems, our presence at Orbital Station 7. This happened because of us. Rebecca paused, but only for a breath, not for effect. Just because the next part was harder. "I have read the statements from Earth Command. I helped write some of them. They talk about system failures and technical errors. They talk about investigations and new protocols. All of that is true. None of that matters, because the stones are still gone. The memorial ship is still destroyed, and no amount of technical explanation changes the harm we have done to your people." On the screen, Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "So I want to say this clearly, in words that mean what they say. We are sorry. Humanity is sorry. Not because diplomatic strategy requires it, not because we want to avoid consequences. We are sorry because we destroyed something precious that belonged to you. We are sorry because we caused you pain. We are sorry because the grief your people feel is real, and we are responsible for it." In his apartment across Geneva, Ross watched the broadcast timer. 2 minutes left before Earth Command could cut the signal. "I have spent weeks studying galactic history," Rebecca continued. "I have read about every major conflict, every peace treaty, every resolution between species. Do you know what I found? In 15,000 years, I could not find a single example of one species genuinely apologizing to another. Not once, not ever." She shook her head slowly. "I found settlements, agreements, reparations. I found elaborate ceremonies designed to let both sides walk away without admitting fault. I found face-saving measures and non-admission clauses and carefully worded statements that acknowledged harm without accepting responsibility. But I did not find apology. Rebecca's voice grew softer but somehow more intense. Maybe there are good reasons for that. Maybe admitting fault at the galactic level is too dangerous. Maybe vulnerability between species leads to exploitation. Maybe every civilization has learned that saying sorry without protection is a path to destruction. But I wonder if there is a cost to that wisdom. I wonder if there are wounds that cannot heal without someone being brave enough to say, "We were wrong." 1 minute left. We cannot return the founding stones. We cannot undo the destruction of your memorial ship. We cannot erase the grief we have caused. All we can offer is the truth. The truth is that we hurt you. The truth is that we take responsibility for that hurt. The truth is that we are sorry, and we would be sorry even if you never forgive us. Rebecca held the camera's gaze. The Alliance of Grievance has demanded an answer from humanity. Here is our answer. We are guilty. We accept that guilt. We do not ask you to minimize it or excuse it. We do not ask for forgiveness. We only ask that you hear our sorrow, because your loss deserves to be acknowledged. The Quarian people deserve to have their pain recognized without deflection, without excuse, without anything except honest regret. She paused one final time. That is all I came to say. We are sorry. Not because strategy demands it, but because sorrow demands it. Because your grief is real and we caused it. Because harm was done and we are responsible. Because this is the truth. And the truth matters more than our pride or our position or our protection. Rebecca reached forward and ended the broadcast. The screen went dark. Her terminal immediately exploded with alerts. Emergency channels from Earth Command. Priority messages from the Assembly. Urgent communications from every diplomatic office in the system. Ross was right. They had about 30 seconds before security arrived at her apartment. Rebecca ignored all of it. She walked back to the window and looked out at the old city. Somewhere up there, beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system. Her words were traveling at light speed toward every inhabited world in the galaxy. The Quarians were hearing them. The Teluvians. The Vryn. 847 civilizations were hearing something they had never heard before. A genuine apology. Rebecca didn't know what would happen next. Maybe the galaxy would see it as weakness. Maybe the Alliance would attack anyway. Maybe Earth Command would arrest her and disavow everything she had said. Or maybe, just maybe, she had started something that couldn't be stopped. The door to her apartment burst open. Security personnel in Earth Force uniforms flooded in. Rebecca turned from the window and smiled slightly. "I know," she said. "I'm under arrest." 3 days passed and the galaxy said nothing. Rebecca sat in a holding facility beneath the United Assembly building. They hadn't formally charged her yet. Unauthorized use of diplomatic channels. Violation of communication protocols. Treason was mentioned in whispers but not in official documents. The lawyers were still figuring out exactly what crime she had committed by telling the truth. She didn't mind the cell. It was quiet, clean. The guards brought her food and let her read. What she minded was the silence from space. Earth's monitoring stations reported the same thing every hour. The Quarian fleet held position. The Alliance ships remained in formation. No attacks, no communications, no response at all. "It's like they're frozen," Greaves said during his visit on the third day. He looked older than Rebecca remembered, worn down by crisis management and sleepless nights. Every monitoring station, every diplomatic channel, every back-channel contact, nothing. They're not responding to anything. Rebecca set down the book she had been reading. What's happening on the alien worlds? We don't know. The few human observers we have report normal activity mostly. Ships coming and going, cities functioning, but the governments are silent. Even species that have nothing to do with the Alliance have stopped communicating. Greaves sat down across from her. "What did you do?" I apologized. "No, you did something else. Something that has every civilization in the galaxy paralyzed." He leaned forward. "The linguistic analysis teams have been studying your broadcast. They say you used words and concepts that don't translate well into most alien languages. The Quarians had to invent 3 new terms just to subtitle your speech." Rebecca thought about that. "What terms?" "Roughly translated, responsibility without deflection, grief acknowledgement with vulnerability, and sorrow that expects no return." Greaves shook his head. "The analysts say these concepts exist in human cultures but not in galactic civilization. You didn't just apologize. You introduced an idea that doesn't exist out there. That's impossible. Every species must understand regret. They understand regret. They understand compensation. They understand conflict resolution. But the thing you described, that specific combination of admitting fault without condition, accepting consequences without negotiation, expressing sorrow without expecting forgiveness, that's human. Greaves stood up. And now the galaxy is trying to process what you've given them. After he left, Rebecca lay on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. She thought about evolutionary paths and cultural development. Humanity had been violent and terrible for most of its history. But somewhere along the way, humans had developed mechanisms for dealing with that violence: apology, reconciliation, truth, and acknowledgement. Not perfectly, not consistently, but the tools existed. Maybe the galaxy had developed differently. Maybe when species reached for the stars, they left those tools behind. Or maybe they never developed them at all. On the Corian homeworld, High Arbiter Quindara sat in the meditation chamber of his ancestral compound. He had been there for 3 days, ever since the human broadcast. Food and water were brought. He consumed them without tasting. His mind was elsewhere. The chamber's walls displayed the history of his people. Battles won and lost. Treaties signed. Honor codes established over millennia. Every Corian leader for 4,000 years had sat in this chamber when facing decisions that would define their era. Quindara could find no guidance in that history. The human had done something outside the framework of everything his people knew. She had admitted fault completely. She had accepted responsibility without demanding recognition for the mitigating factors. She had expressed sorrow without asking for anything in return. In Korean culture, such vulnerability was unthinkable. It was suicide. If you admitted you were wrong without protection, your enemies would destroy you. If you showed weakness without securing guarantees, you would be exploited. These were fundamental truths, encoded in the honor codes that had kept Korean civilization stable for thousands of years. But the human had done it anyway. And she was not destroyed. She was arrested, yes, but by her own people. And even that seemed uncertain. Would they really punish her for speaking truth? Quindara called for his advisors. They came quickly, 12 of them representing different clans and different philosophical traditions. The human speaks words we do not have, Quindara said. Our translators struggle. Our scholars debate meaning. What is she truly saying? The eldest advisor spoke first. She admits guilt. This is clear. She accepts responsibility. This is also clear. What is unclear is her purpose. Is this a strategy? A manipulation? What does she gain from this vulnerability? Perhaps that is the question we should not ask, another advisor said. Perhaps the human gains nothing. Perhaps that is the point. The chamber fell silent. Finally, a younger advisor spoke. High Arbiter, I must confess something. After the human broadcast, I went to the archives. I studied our own history, the conflicts we have had with other species, the resolutions we have made. In every case, we found ways to end conflict without admitting fault. We preserved our honor. We maintained our strength. This is proper, Quindara said. Yes, but High Arbiter, we also never healed. The Tuluvians fought us 800 years ago. We signed a treaty. We established borders. But we still teach our children that the Tuluvians are untrustworthy. They still teach their collectives that Corians are aggressive. The wound remains covered but not healed. The eldest advisor stood abruptly. You suggest we apologize for our past actions? Impossible. It would invalidate generations of honor codes. I suggest nothing, the young advisor said. I only observe what the human has revealed. We have no framework for what she has done, perhaps because we have never tried to create one. Quindara dismissed the advisors. He sat alone in the chamber, thinking about honor and strength and vulnerability, thinking about wounds that never healed because no one wanted to be the first to admit they had caused pain. On 17 different worlds, similar conversations were happening. The Tuluvian collective, a hive mind species that had not experienced individual thought in 3,000 years, suddenly found its members having private reactions to the human broadcast. Some nodes felt moved. Others felt threatened. The collective fractured slightly, a crack in the unity that had defined them. The Vryn assembly debated for 48 straight hours. Some members wanted to reject the human apology as manipulation. Others wanted to study it as a curiosity. A small group, mostly younger Vryn, began asking dangerous questions. Why have we never apologized for the colony exploitation? Why did we never admit fault for the trade sanctions that caused famine? The Crystalline Shard Collective experienced something unprecedented. Individual crystals began emitting frequencies that translated to confusion and introspection. Their colonial period had affected 14 species. They had withdrawn, yes. They had provided transition support, yes. But had they ever said they were sorry? Back on Earth, Rebecca received a visitor. Captain Ross came to her cell with news. The military tribunal has decided not to charge you. Earth Command is furious, but they can't figure out what crime to accuse you of. Unauthorized broadcast doesn't seem sufficient given the circumstances. What circumstances? The galaxy is having a breakdown, Ross said. Not violent. Not aggressive. Just paralyzed. Every major civilization is in internal crisis. The monitoring stations are picking up unprecedented levels of domestic communication. Debates. Arguments. On some worlds, protests. Peaceful ones, but still. Protests about what? Ross smiled slightly. About all the apologies their leaders never made. About all the conflicts that were settled but never resolved. About wounds that are hundreds of years old and still hurting because no one ever admitted they caused them. Rebecca stood up. The Koreans? Still silent. But their fleet pattern changed. It's no longer a grief formation. It's something else. Our analysts can't identify it. Show me. They went to the monitoring room. On the screen, Rebecca saw the Korean ships. They had rearranged themselves into a spiral pattern, slowly rotating. It was beautiful and strange and somehow expectant. What does it mean? She asked. We don't know, Ross said, but they're waiting for something. The whole galaxy is waiting. Rebecca understood then. The silence wasn't rejection. It wasn't acceptance either. The galaxy had fallen silent because she had given them something they had no framework to process. Something that challenged the fundamental ways they understood conflict and resolution and strength. They were waiting to see what happened next, waiting to see if vulnerability led to destruction or to something else, waiting to see if humanity's gift to the galaxy was wisdom or suicide, and Rebecca realized that she was waiting too. The first crack in the galactic silence came from an unexpected source. Not the Koreans, not any member of the Alliance of Grievance. It came from a small species called the Binari, who had been part of galactic civilization for only 200 years. The Binari ambassador appeared on the Galactic Communication Network with a simple statement. 300 years ago, before we joined the galactic community, we had a war with our neighboring species, the Tavari. We won, we took territory, we took resources. When we achieved space travel and met the Tavari again, we negotiated a peace. We established trade. We never said we were sorry for what we took. We say it now. We were wrong. We apologize. The broadcast lasted 45 seconds. Then the Binari ambassador disappeared. For 12 hours, nothing happened. Then the Tavari responded. Not with words. They sent a delegation to the Binari homeworld. The delegation carried gifts from their sacred groves, living plants that the Tavari considered precious beyond measure. Rebecca watched the recordings from her quarters. Earth Command had released her from detention but kept her under observation. She wasn't sure if she was a prisoner or a diplomat or something else entirely. It's spreading, Ross said, reviewing the data streams. 4 more species have issued statements. Not about the Korean incident, about their own histories. Old conflicts, things that happened decades or centuries ago. Rebecca pulled up the files. A species called the Niven had apologized to their former colony worlds. The Crystalline Shard Collective had issued a statement about their resource extraction practices. 2 neighboring species that had fought a war 500 years ago had simultaneously broadcast apologies to each other. The galaxy is fragmenting, Greaves said during his daily briefing. The Alliance of Grievance is breaking apart. Some species are pulling back their ships. Others are demanding emergency council sessions. The Toluvian Collective is experiencing something they're calling a consciousness divergence. Individual members are having thoughts that don't match the collective mind. What about the Koreans? Rebecca asked, still silent. Still in that spiral formation, but they've been joined by ships from other species. Not military ships. Civilian vessels. Thousands of them. They're arranging themselves around the Korean fleet like they're waiting for something. Rebecca understood. The galaxy was holding its breath. Everything depended on what Quindara decided. If the Koreans accepted the apology, If they found a way to respond to vulnerability with something other than exploitation, then maybe the path Rebecca had opened would remain open. If they attacked, if they used humanity's admission of guilt as justification for destruction, then the old rules would remain in place. 6 days after Rebecca's broadcast, High Arbiter Quindara finally spoke. He appeared on every channel in every system. Behind him, the meditation chamber of his ancestral compound was visible. His 4 eyes held something that the translators labeled as uncertainty, though the Korean word meant something closer to transformation in progress. "I am High Arbiter Quindara of the Korean people," he began. "For 10 days I have been silent. My people have been silent. We have been trying to understand what the human Rebecca Walsh has done." He paused, and in that pause the entire galaxy waited. "She has not weakened herself. She has revealed our weakness." Quindara stood, walking slowly through the chamber. For 4,000 years, Korean honor codes have guided our civilization. These codes teach us that admitting fault is weakness, that showing vulnerability invites attack, that accepting responsibility without protection is death. We built these codes to survive. They have kept us strong, but the human has shown us what we sacrificed for that strength. He stopped in front of a wall display showing the Korean Wars. Dozens of them. Centuries of conflict. Every war we fought ended in settlement. Terms were negotiated. Power was balanced. Honor was preserved on both sides. We believed this was wisdom. But look at what we preserved. He gestured at the display. Every species we fought, we still distrust. Every conflict we resolved, we still remember. The wounds remain because we never admitted we caused them. We never said we were sorry because sorry was suicide. Quindara turned back to the camera. But the human said sorry. She admitted complete fault. She accepted responsibility without condition. She made herself utterly vulnerable. And she is not destroyed. She is not exploited. Instead, she has started something that is shaking every civilization in the galaxy. His voice grew stronger. "I have spent 10 days in meditation. I have consulted with our elders and our philosophers. I have studied our own history with new eyes. And I have come to understand something. The human did not give us an apology. She gave us a mirror. She showed us what we have never been brave enough to do." Quindara's 4 eyes seemed to look directly through the camera, directly at every being watching. "The Korean people accept humanity's apology. We acknowledge their sorrow. We recognize their courage. But more than this, we must speak our own truth." He took a breath. The entire galaxy held theirs. We, the Korean people, must also apologize to the Teluvians for the war 800 years ago. We say we fought for territory, for security. The truth is we fought for pride and expansion. We were wrong. To the Vrin, for the trade embargo 100 years ago. We say it was economic policy. The truth is it was punishment for perceived disrespect. We were wrong. To 16 other species for conflicts large and small, for harm done and never acknowledged. We were wrong. The chamber fell silent. The human taught us that saying sorry without protection is not suicide. It is survival. It is the only way to heal wounds that have festered for centuries. It is the only way to build something better than what we have. Quindara walked back to his seat. "I speak for the Korean people when I say this. We have been strong in war. We have been clever in negotiation. We have preserved our honor through countless conflicts. But we have never been brave enough to be vulnerable. The humans are braver than we are. They have given the galaxy a gift we did not know we needed. The gift of honest sorrow. The gift of acknowledged guilt. The gift of apology without condition." He looked directly into the camera one last time. "To Rebecca Walsh and to all of humanity, the Korean people say this. We hear your apology. We feel your sorrow. We recognize what you have lost by being honest. And we thank you for showing us what true strength looks like." The broadcast ended. For 3 seconds, the galaxy remained silent. Then it exploded. Messages flooded every communication channel. Species after species began issuing statements. Some were apologies for ancient wrongs. Some were acceptances of apologies already given. Some were just expressions of confusion and fear and hope. The alliance of grievance dissolved completely, not because the Koreans ordered it, because its member species were too busy examining their own histories to maintain their grievance against humanity. Rebecca watched it all from Earth. She felt tears on her face and didn't bother wiping them away. Ross stood beside her, also crying. Even Greaves, career diplomat who had seen everything, looked overwhelmed. "You changed the galaxy," Ross said quietly. "No," Rebecca said. "I just reminded them of something they had forgotten. Or maybe something they never learned. That healing is more important than honor. That vulnerability is stronger than protection. That sorry matters even when nothing else does." On screens all around them, the galaxy was transforming. Old enemies were talking. Ancient conflicts were being reopened, not to fight them again, but to finally resolve them properly. Species were admitting to wrongdoings that had been buried for centuries. The change wasn't universal. Some species rejected the whole thing as madness. Some held onto their old ways. But enough species had embraced the new path that nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had given the galaxy a tool it had never possessed. The ability to truly apologize, the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to admit fault without condition, and in doing so, humanity had become something they had never been before. Not conquerors, not explorers, but teachers, healers, the species that showed the galaxy how to say sorry. Rebecca smiled through her tears. She thought about her grandfather, about all the apologies that had never been spoken, about wounds that had carried across generations because no one had the courage to admit they caused them. Maybe it was too late for her grandfather. But it wasn't too late for the galaxy. The healing had begun. 1 year after the broadcast that changed everything, Orbital Station 7 had a new name. The Galactic Council had voted unanimously to rename it the House of Acknowledgement. The station that had been the site of humanity's greatest mistake had become the place where species came to face their own mistakes. Rebecca Walsh stood in what used to be the main conference hall. The room had been completely redesigned. Instead of the cold diplomatic chamber with its formal seating arrangements, the space now felt open and warm. Curved benches arranged in circles, soft lighting, windows that looked out at the stars. "This is where the Neven and the Cortash met last week," her assistant said. A young human named Paul, who had joined the diplomatic corps specifically to work on reconciliation projects. They had been enemies for 300 years. After 6 days of talks, they signed the first genuine peace treaty in galactic history, one that includes mutual apologies and acknowledgement of specific harms. Rebecca walked through the space, remembering the chaos of a year ago. The grief formation of Korean ships, the alliance of grievance preparing for war, the feeling that humanity had destroyed any chance of peace. Now the station hosted an average of 12 reconciliation sessions per month. Species that had been avoiding each other for centuries were coming here to talk, really talk, about what had happened, about who had been hurt, about what needed to be acknowledged before moving forward. The Korean sent a message, Paul continued, checking his terminal. "Hi, Arbiter Quindara wants to know if you're available for the memorial dedication next month." "I'll be there." The memorial was being built in orbit around the Korean homeworld. A reconstruction of the destroyed memorial ship, created through a joint human-Korean project. The founding stones were gone, but in their place would be something new. A monument to the power of acknowledgement, to the strength of vulnerability, to the moment when two species found a better way. Rebecca left the conference hall and walked to the observation deck. The view here had not changed. The stars looked the same as they had a year ago. But everything else was different. The galaxy was still struggling with what had been unleashed. Not every species had embraced apology and reconciliation. Some maintained that the old ways were safer, stronger. There had been resistance and skepticism and fear, but there had also been healing, real healing. Wounds that had festered for centuries were being addressed. Species that had avoided each other were talking. Old hatreds were being examined, acknowledged, and slowly released. "Dr. Walsh?" A voice behind her. Rebecca turned to find a Korean standing in the doorway. Female, judging by the pattern of honor scars. Young, perhaps equivalent to a human in their 20s. "I am Third Scholar Rilvera," the Korean said. "I have been assigned to study human reconciliation practices. I hope to speak with you about your work." Rebecca smiled. "Of course. Please join me." They stood together at the window. Rilvera's 4 eyes reflected the starlight. "I must confess something," the young Korean said. "When I first heard your broadcast, I thought you were weak. I thought humanity had made a terrible mistake. My entire education taught me that admitting fault without protection is suicide. What changed your mind?" "I watched what happened after. I saw species beginning to apologize. I saw old conflicts being resolved. And I started asking questions. Rilvera turned to face Rebecca. I asked my parents about the Tuluvian War. They told me the official history, the territorial dispute, the honorable settlement. But when I pressed them, when I asked if the Corians had done anything wrong, they became uncomfortable. My father finally admitted that we had started the war over an insult. A perceived insult, not a real threat. Just wounded pride, Rebecca nodded. And I realized that we had been carrying the weight of that unacknowledged wrong for 800 years. Teaching each generation to distrust the Tuluvians, maintaining a conflict that should have ended centuries ago, all because we were too proud to admit we had made a mistake. Rilvera looked back at the stars. You were not weak. We were weak. We were too weak to be honest. They stood in silence for a moment. I'm writing a thesis, Rilvera continued, about the evolution of human concepts of apology and reconciliation. About how your species developed these tools over thousands of years of conflict. About what you can teach the rest of the galaxy. We're not perfect at it, Rebecca said. Humans still struggle with apology. We still have conflicts we haven't resolved. We still carry wounds we haven't healed. But you have the tools. You have the words. You have the cultural framework that makes acknowledgement possible. Rilvera pulled up a display on her wrist device. I have been studying Earth's history. Your wars, your genocides, your terrible mistakes. But I also found this. The display showed images from Earth. Truth and reconciliation commissions. Public apologies from governments. Memorials acknowledging historical wrongs. People speaking publicly about harm they had caused and grief they had felt. You hurt each other terribly, Rilvera said. But you also learned to face that hurt. To speak about it. To try to heal it. This is what makes humans unique. Not that you never caused harm, but that you developed ways to acknowledge harm and try to move forward. Rebecca thought about her grandfather again, about the apology that had never come, about her own part in keeping that silence. But she also thought about the apologies that had come, about the wounds that had healed, about the humans who had found the courage to face what they had done. We're teaching a class, Rebecca said, starting next month, about reconciliation practices from Earth, about how to conduct truth processes and acknowledgement ceremonies, about the language of genuine apology. Would you like to be part of it? Rilvera's 4 eyes brightened. Yes, very much yes. Later that day, Rebecca met with Captain Ross in the station's new reconciliation center. He had been working on a project of his own, a memorial for the 43 crew members who had died in his accident 8 years ago. I spoke with their families, Ross said. He looked tired but lighter somehow. All of them. I told them what happened, the technical details they already knew, but also how I felt, the guilt I carried, the fear of admitting responsibility. I apologized. Really apologized. Not the formal statement I made at the inquiry, but real words about real grief. How did they respond? Some were angry. A few had been angry for 8 years and finally had someone to direct that anger at. Some cried. One man hugged me and said he had been waiting for me to be honest with him. Ross sat down heavily. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But also the most important, because those people deserved acknowledgement. They deserved to have their loss recognized by someone who took responsibility for it. Rebecca sat beside him. The memorial? Dedicated next week. The families helped design it. Not just a list of names, but stories, pictures, things they loved, ways they lived. And yes, an acknowledgement of what happened and why. He looked at Rebecca. You started something. Not just in the galaxy, but in me. In a lot of us. Over the next weeks, Rebecca taught her first class. 34 students from 18 different species. They learned about human concepts of apology, about truth and reconciliation processes from Earth's history, about the language needed to acknowledge harm without deflection. But more than that, they learned about courage, about the bravery required to be vulnerable, about the strength needed to admit fault without guarantee of safety. Some students struggled with the concepts. Their cultures had no framework for unconditional apology. The words didn't translate. The ideas felt dangerous, but others embraced it with an almost desperate relief, as if they had been waiting their whole lives for permission to admit they had caused harm, for tools to acknowledge wounds they had inflicted, for a path toward healing that their own cultures had never provided. On the last day of class, Rebecca stood before her students and asked them a question. What is the cost of never apologizing? A Teluvian student spoke first. We carry the weight of unacknowledged harm. It becomes heavier with each generation. A Vrin student added, we cannot truly move past conflict. We can only bury it. Rilvera, the young Korean scholar, said quietly, we become smaller, harder, less able to grow, because growth requires admitting we were wrong about something. Rebecca nodded. And what is the gift of apology? Silence for a moment. Then a human student spoke. Freedom. From the weight of pretending we're innocent. From the burden of defended lies. And what is the risk? Rebecca asked. That we will be destroyed for our honesty, said a crystalline student from the Shard Collective. Yes, Rebecca said. That is the risk. Vulnerability can be exploited. Honesty can be used against us. Admitting fault without protection is dangerous. But so is the alternative. So is carrying wounds that never heal. So is teaching our children to hate because we're too proud to admit we caused harm. She looked at each student. A year ago, I broke every rule of galactic diplomacy. I apologized without authorization, without protection, without any guarantee that it wouldn't destroy humanity. I did it because the alternative was worse. Because some truths are more important than safety. Because healing matters more than pride. The students listened in silence. You will go back to your worlds. You will try to teach what you've learned here. Some people will reject it. Some will fear it. Some will use the old arguments about strength and weakness and survival. But some will listen. Some will understand. And slowly, generation by generation, the galaxy will change. After class, Rebecca returned to the observation deck. The stars looked back at her, ancient and indifferent. But the galaxy they illuminated was not indifferent. It was learning, growing, healing. She thought about the title people had started using for her. The apologist. She didn't love it, but she understood it. She had become a symbol of something the galaxy had needed. Proof that vulnerability didn't mean destruction. Evidence that saying sorry was not weakness but strength. Earth's news services were calling it humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization. Not faster than light travel. Not advanced weapons. Not even art or music or literature. But this. The courage to apologize. The strength to be vulnerable. The wisdom to acknowledge harm without condition. Rebecca smiled. She thought about all the humans throughout history who had learned to say sorry, who had found the courage to face what they had done, who had chosen healing over pride. They had given humanity this tool, this gift, and humanity in turn had given it to the galaxy. The apology that shook the galaxy and silenced every alien voice, not because it was loud, but because it was true. And truth, spoken with courage, is the most powerful force in the universe.